Have you ever looked at a tree, or maybe even just a house plant, and thought, yep, that's a plant. Green, still just doing its thing.
Uh-huh.
Well, get ready to maybe challenge that fundamental assumption a little bit.
Right,
What if the plants all around us aren't just these passive backdrops?
right,
What if they're active participants in this, I don't know, complex, bustling world,
right.
both beneath our feet and in the air around us?
A world where they're communicating, remembering.
And even maybe outwitting other organisms.
It's a really remarkable shift in thinking, isn't it? We're so used to seeing plants as, well, quiet, rooted, almost just decorative sometimes.
Totally.
But the science is genuinely suggesting they possess forms of intelligence, maybe memory, and definitely strategic manipulation that honestly can rival some animal behaviors.
It really forces you to rethink things.
It does.
And that's pretty much our mission for this deep dive, to
Yeah.
try and unveil some of this incredible, often overlooked secret life of plants. We're going to explore how they connect, maybe how they learn, and yeah, even how they trick other organisms to survive and, well, thrive.
Prepare for maybe a few aha moments.
Yeah, I think so. Hopefully by the end, you'll see the whole plant kingdom with maybe entirely new eyes.
And the insights we're diving into today, they come from a really fascinating mix of sources.
Okay.
We've looked at some pioneering forest ecology research, cutting-edge scientific articles on plant behavior, and also comprehensive studies looking into plant mimicry.
So a broad view.
Yeah, it gives us a pretty multifaceted view of this, hidden world. A more complete picture, hopefully.
Okay, great. So let's peel back those layers then,
Yeah.
starting with something that, I mean, it sounds like science fiction, but it's very real. The Wood Wide Web.
Right. The Wood Wide Web.
For so long, our understanding of a forest was basically individual trees
Right.
competing for light, water, nutrients.
Standard view, yeah.
But what if that entire idea is maybe fundamentally flawed?
It feels like a complete paradigm shift, honestly. The astonishing discovery is that trees in a forest are, well, they're rarely truly isolated. Instead, they form this vast, intricate, and often vital underground network, connecting with each other almost like a hidden city.
A hidden metropolis.
Exactly. It's far more collaborative, it seems, than we ever really imagined nature could be.
And the person who really brought this hidden world into the light, that's Dr. Suzanne Simard.
That's right, a forest ecology professor, University of British Columbia. Her work, starting back in the 1990s, was groundbreaking.
Okay.
It really began to reveal these complex subterranean relationships and, yeah, eventually led her to coin that really evocative term, Wood Wide Web.
It just captures it perfectly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like an organic internet.
It does. And what's truly fascinating is how it works, the mechanics of it.
Right.
At the heart of this network is a symbiotic relationship
Yeah.
between trees and mycorrhizal fungi.
Mycorrhizal fungi. Okay.
Think of it like a biological marketplace almost. Trees provide the fungi with carbon, the sugars they make through photosynthesis.
Food for the fungi.
Exactly. And in return, the fungi, through their huge, extensive mycelial networks, these tiny threads, they act like this massive underground absorption system.
Wow.
Super efficient at drawing in essential nutrients like phosphorus, nitrogen, and water from the soil and delivering them right to the trees.
So the trees are literally feeding the fungi to get this superhighway for crucial nutrients.
Pretty much, yeah.
But you mentioned communication highway too. How literal are we talking? Can trees actually send warnings through this?
They absolutely can. It's amazing. Trees can send and receive chemical warning signals through this fungal network to their neighbors.
So if one tree gets attacked by bugs,
By pests, yeah. It can literally alert the others nearby, prompting them to activate their own defenses before the pests even get there.
that's incredible. And it gets even more profound, right?
Mhm.
I've heard about these mother trees.
Ah, yes. The mother trees.
What role do they play in this whole community?
They seem to act as central hubs. These are often the older, larger trees in the forest,
Okay.
and they can transfer excess nutrients, even water, through the network to younger, maybe struggling saplings or even trees that are injured.
Wow, like intergenerational support.
It really looks like it. Simard's early experiments showed this so vividly. She used radioactive carbon isotopes.
Right, to trace things.
Exactly. To trace the transfer of carbon between, say, Douglas fir and paper birch trees. And it provided concrete, undeniable evidence of this incredible interconnectedness.
That really does underscore the mission of, safeguarding these connections then.
Absolutely.
So if these connections get broken, say through logging or other disturbances, what's the actual impact on a forest's ability to survive? Especially with things like climate change.
Oh, it's critical. Dr. Simard's Mother Tree Project is focused exactly on this issue, trying to safeguard forests, particularly in British Columbia. Maintaining these natural connections, it dramatically enhances forest regeneration, it supports biodiversity, it helps conserve carbon storage.
All crucial things.
Hugely crucial, especially in drier climates, where seedlings become much more dependent on these networks for water and nutrients just to survive. Disrupting them can have these cascading negative effects through the whole ecosystem.
It's just incredible to think about this hidden, complex world right under our feet.
It really is.
But nature's rarely simple, is it? Even underground. Is there downside?
Well, yeah, there's always nuance. While it's mostly beneficial, it is important to acknowledge that this network, in some cases, might also help the spread of certain diseases between trees.
Ah, okay, so it's not always a perfect utopia.
Not always perfect, no. But the overall benefits for the forest community seem to largely outweigh those risks.
Okay. So we've explored these intricate networks under the ground. But what about the air? Are plants sending messages through the air we breathe too?
They absolutely are, through what scientists call volatile organic compounds, VOCs for short.
VOCs.
These are basically the sophisticated language of scents and chemical signals that plants release into the air.
The language of smells?
You could think of it like that, yeah. Or like their own invisible air traffic control system for survival and interaction.
So how does that work? How do they use these VOCs?
Oh, okay, here's where it gets really fascinating. When a plant is attacked by herbivores, let's say a hungry caterpillar munching on its leaves,
Wait.
it doesn't just sit there and take it. It releases specific VOCs into the air, kind of like a distress signal.
And other plants can smell this.
Exactly. Neighboring plants detect these airborne signals and can actually preemptively ramp up their own chemical defenses.
Before they even get attacked.
Yes, like producing anti-herbivore toxins or just making their leaves taste really, really bad. It's like a botanical early warning system.
Shouting danger across the field.
Precisely. And sometimes it's not just about defense. Some plants take it a step further, using VOCs to literally call for help.
Call for help.
Well, for instance, corn seedlings, when they're under attack by certain caterpillars, can emit VOCs that specifically attract the natural predators of those caterpillars.
Like wasps or something.
Like parasitic wasp, exactly. The plant is essentially orchestrating its own biological defense, bringing in the cavalry, you could say.
That's indirect action at its finest.
Isn't it?
And then, of course, on maybe the more beautiful side of things, flowers.
Ah, yes. The alluring scents of flowers. Those are VOCs too.
Right.
Precisely designed chemical cocktails to attract specific pollinators, whether it's insects, birds, maybe even bats, whatever's needed for that plant's reproductive success.
So every lovely flower smell is actually a very precise chemical message.
Crafted very carefully by evolution to lure the perfect partner, yeah.
That's amazing. And are we still learning more about this chemical language?
Constantly. The latest advancements are really exciting. Researchers are starting to identify unique VOC fingerprints for different threats, different plant species.
So it's even more complex than we thought.
Oh, definitely. It emphasizes the immense, intricate complexity of these chemical cocktails and just how much more there is still to learn about their specific meanings, their messages.
Okay, so plants can network underground. They can communicate chemically through the air, send distress calls, call for backup. But what if they can also remember? I mean, the idea that plants might possess forms of memory, maybe even learning, that directly challenges this long-held belief that you need a brain, right?
Yeah.
Or a nervous system.
It does. It's a concept that certainly sparks a lot of scientific discussion, even debate. The term plant memory itself is kind of provocative.
But there have been hints before, haven't there, historically?
Oh, yeah. There have been glimpses, early experiments. Mark Jafford, I think, observed pea tendrils that seemed to retain a stimulus. They'd coil up hours later, even if it was dark.
Holding on to information.
It suggested an ability to hold on to information, yeah. Which is, a fundamental aspect of memory.
And then there's the Venus flytrap that feels like a classic example of short-term memory, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's a great one. It needs 2 touches, right? Within about 20 seconds to trigger its trap snap shut.
Yeah.
Researchers Hodick and Sievers, they propose this involves calcium building up. The first touch starts it, the second pushes it over a threshold.
And if the second touch doesn't come fast enough?
That memory of the first touch is lost. The calcium levels drop and the trap won't close. It's a very clever way to save energy, actually. Don't snap shut for just anything.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But saving energy is one thing. What about learning? Really learning from experience. That's where Dr. Monica Galliano's research comes in, right? Her work seems quite seminal here.
It really is. Her work truly pushed these boundaries. Take her 2014 experiment with Mimosa pudica, the sensitive plant.
The one that folds its leaves when you touch it.
That's the one. She repeatedly dropped these plants. Just a short drop, not damaging.
Okay.
And initially, of course, they folded their leaves. That's their defense response. But after several repetitions, they habituated. They stopped reacting.
They learned the drop wasn't a threat.
It seems so. They were conserving energy. But what's crucial is when she later shook them by hand, a different stimulus, they still curled their leaves.
So they hadn't just gotten tired or broken.
Exactly. It showed they had specifically learned that the dropping stimulus wasn't dangerous rather than simply losing the ability to respond altogether.
And how long did this memory last, this habituation?
This is the really remarkable part. This learned memory of not needing to react to the dropping persisted for up to a month.
A month. Without a brain.
Without a brain or nervous system, as we typically understand it. It suggests a really surprising capacity for long-term information retention. It certainly makes you question our definitions.
Absolutely. And she didn't stop there, did she? There was another experiment with pea plants. In a maze.
Yes, the Y maze experiment in 2016, also fascinating. In that setup, pea plants apparently learned to associate a fan just airflow with a light source, which they naturally grow towards.
So they learned that the fan meant light was nearby.
That seemed to be the conclusion, because even when only the fan was present, later on the plants grew towards it, as if they'd learned that association.
Wow.
Though it's worth noting this learned behavior apparently only worked during the daytime, which suggests maybe a link to their internal clocks, their circadian rhythms.
Okay, so if it's not neurons, how might this memory actually work at a cellular level? What are the ideas?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Scientists think calcium-based signaling networks, similar perhaps to the Venus flytrap mechanism but maybe more complex, play a key role.
Okay.
And also epigenetic changes.
Epigenetics. Can you unpack that a bit?
Sure. Think of epigenetic changes as like little sticky notes or bookmarks put onto the plant's DNA. They don't change the DNA sequence itself, but they modify how genes are expressed.
So they can turn genes on or off based on past events.
Exactly. Modifications to things called histones and chromatin can alter gene expression, allowing plants to essentially remember past experiences like stress, drought, cold, attack, and adapt their growth or defenses accordingly.
And these changes can even be passed down.
Some evidence suggests they can, yes. Passed down to offspring. A kind of inherited memory, which is incredible to think about.
Wow, that's mind-blowing. And you mentioned internal clocks.
Right. Plants definitely use internal biological clocks. These are set up by photoreceptors detecting light. They use these clocks to memorize day-night cycles, seasonal changes.
Which influences things like flowering.
Precisely. Flowering, when to go dormant for winter, all sorts of crucial behaviors rely on this memorized timekeeping.
And is there anything like trauma memory?
There's research exploring that too. Some experiments show plants exhibiting asymmetrical growth in response to past physical damage. Like if one side was injured, buds on that side might behave differently later.
In a mechanism there.
The hypothesis involves plant hormones like auxin and, again, calcium signaling, possibly storing a memory of that physical trauma in the buds themselves.
Okay, now we should add some nuance here, right? Dr. Galliano's work is incredibly fascinating, really paradigm shifting. But, as often happens in science, not all attempts to replicate her experiments, particularly the pea plant Y maze 1, have gotten the exact same results.
That's true. There was a replication attempt by Casey Markle, for example, that didn't find the same associative learning effect.
So what does that mean for this field?
It means it's still a very active and honestly evolving area of scientific inquiry. It needs more research, more verification, more exploration of the precise conditions required.
Right. Science in action.
Exactly. It highlights that science is a process. Initial findings can be compelling, revolutionary even, but rigorous replication and further investigation are absolutely essential to really solidify our understanding. It's part of the exciting journey of discovery, not a refutation necessarily.
Okay, so plants can network, communicate, maybe remember and learn. It's already pretty amazing. But what about their more, shall we say, cunning side? Are they capable of outright deception?
Oh, absolutely.
Let's explore how plants are not just responsive, but sometimes active manipulators, deceivers even, employing these really clever evolutionary adaptations to survive and reproduce.
Yeah, this is where things get really wild. We can start with maybe the most dramatic examples. Carnivorous plants.
The meat eaters.
Well, insect eaters mostly. Their purpose isn't just to be, gothic and cool. They've evolved this way to supplement their nutrient intake, especially nitrogen.
Because they live in poor soil.
Exactly. In bogs, sandy soils, places where the soil alone just doesn't provide enough nutrients, so they capture prey.
And the methods are incredible. The Venus flytrap, obviously.
Iconic. Those hinged leaves snapping shut in less than a tenth of a second when triggered.
Yeah. Or pitcher plants.
Right. Their modified leaves form these ingenious pitcher-like traps, often slippery, sometimes with downward-pointing hairs, filled with digestive fluids, and they lure insects in, often with nectar or scents.
To their doom. Nature's silent hunters.
Quite literally. But beyond outright carnivory, there's this broader concept of plant mimicry.
Mimicry. So pretending to be something else.
Precisely. Where a plant evolves to physically or chemically resemble another organism, or even an inanimate object, specifically to trick or dupe another organism.
And why? Survival. Reproduction.
Both. It's all about gaining an edge. Let's look at reproductive mimicry first, deceiving pollinators.
Okay.
There's something called brood site deception. Think of carrion flowers, like the giant Amorphophallus tartanum, the corpse flower.
The ones that smell famously awful.
Exactly. They mimic the scent and sometimes even the appearance of rotting flesh.
Who attract flies.
Flies and beetles that normally lay their eggs on carcasses. The flower tricks them into visiting, maybe offers a tiny nectar reward. They crawl around looking for a place to lay eggs, pick up pollen, move to the next stinky flower, and pollinate it.
And the flies get nothing for their trouble.
Their larvae hatch into a completely unsuitable, foodless environment. It's a total trick.
Wow. It's ruthless.
Then there's Poyanian mimicry, or more simply, sexual deception. This is amazing. This is when a flower pretends to be an insect's mate.
It pretends to be a female insect.
Often, yes. Many orchids are masters of this. The Ophrys bee orchids, for example, they mimic the shape, the color, even the pheromones, the scent of a female bee or wasp.
No way.
Yes. So the male insect flies in, thinking he's found a mate, and tries to mate with the flower. It's called pseudocopulation.
He tries to mate with the flower.
He does, and in the process, he bumps into the pollen sacs, which stick to him. Then he flies off, gets fooled by another orchid, tries again, and deposits the pollen.
The plant is using insect lust for pollination.
Pretty much. Another cool example is Epipactis helleborine, an orchid that attracts social wasps.
How did it trick wasps?
It releases those green leaf volatiles we talked about earlier, the VOCs, but specifically ones that are similar to those produced by leaves infested with caterpillars.
Which is food for the wasps.
Exactly. It's a key prey cue for the wasps. They come looking for caterpillars, investigate the flower, and end up pollinating it. The plant is playing matchmaker, but definitely not for the insect's benefit.
Okay, that's seriously cunning. But it's not just about attracting things, right? They use mimicry for defense, too.
Oh, yes. Defensive mimicry, deceiving herbivores. Think about thorn mimicry.
Making themselves look spiky.
Right. It can happen in two ways. Sometimes it's intraorganismic within the same plant. Like the teeth on the edge of an aloe or agave leaf create imprints on the leaf surface that look like thorns all over.
So it looks more defended than it is.
Exactly. Or it can be classic Batesian mimicry, where harmless plant parts evolve to mimic the warning signals like bright colors of actual dangerous thorns found on other plants in the area, even if this plant doesn't have real thorns itself. It's a bluff.
A visual bluff. What else?
Some plants even go for spiderweb mimicry.
Pretending to have spiders.
Sort of. Dense white hairs called trichomes on new stems and leaves. You see this on some thistles like Onoportum or Carthamus can look a bit like spider silk or maybe even fungal growth.
And herbivores don't like that.
Apparently not. They might avoid it thinking they'll get tangled or perhaps infected by fungus. It's a deterrent.
Okay, that's clever. What about bird droppings? Is that really a thing?
It sounds bizarre, but yes. Bird dropping mimicry. Some plants, like lungwort, Pulmonaria officinalis, have these irregular white blotches on their leaves.
And that looks like?
It might mimic bird droppings. And herbivores generally tend to avoid feeding near dung or droppings, possibly because they could be sources of disease or parasites.
So the plant makes itself look unappetizingly decorated.
Strategically off-putting, you could say.
Wow. Okay. What about just hiding? Camouflage.
Absolutely. Crypsis, or camouflage, reaches some extraordinary levels in plants. There is this vine from South America, Bocchilla trifoliata.
Okay.
It has this unbelievable ability. As it climbs up a host tree or shrub, it changes its own leaves to mimic the leaves of the host it's climbing on.
It changes its leaf shape and color.
Shape, size, color, even the vein pattern sometimes. It literally transforms its appearance to blend in perfectly with whatever it's touching.
How on earth does it do that? How does it know what the host looks like?
That is the million-dollar question. Scientists are baffled. There's speculation it might involve some kind of vision, maybe detecting light patterns, or perhaps incredibly delicate chemical sensing of the host.
It sounds like science fiction.
It gets weirder. It's even been observed mimicking artificial plastic plants placed next to it.
That's just uncanny. True camouflage.
And perhaps the ultimate plant camouflage belongs to the lithops, the pebble plants from southern Africa.
I think I've seen pictures. They look exactly like stones.
They really do. They're remarkably camouflaged as small pebbles or stones in their arid, rocky environments. Makes them extremely difficult for thirsty or hungry herbivores to spot. Masters of disguise.
Okay, so mimicry for defense, reproduction. What about manipulating animals for other reasons, like spreading seeds?
Yes, let's revisit that. Plants aren't just passive about seed dispersal. They actively manipulate animals, especially scatter-hoarding animals like squirrels or jays, to do their bidding.
Manipulate them how?
It's an incredibly clever strategy to make sure their offspring get planted, essentially.
Okay, so how do they pull off these deceptions to get seeds spread effectively?
Well, first, they produce large, nutritious seeds and nuts. Things like acorns, walnuts, hickory nuts. These are inherently attractive to animals.
Right, good food source.
And that high value stimulates caching behavior, the instinct to bury food for later. These larger items also tend to get carried further away from the parent tree.
Reducing competition.
Exactly. And they often stay in the cache longer, which increases the chance they'll be forgotten and actually germinate.
Ah, okay. And I remember reading they make it difficult for the animals to eat them right away. Something about handling costs.
Precisely. They impose handling costs. This makes the seed less appealing now, encouraging the animal to bury it later.
How do they do that?
It can be physical barriers, like the incredibly hard shell of a black walnut. It takes a long time and a lot of effort for a squirrel to open it.
So if the squirrel isn't starving?
It's more profitable energetically for a partially full squirrel to just bury it for later rather than spend all that time opening it right now.
Clever. What about chemical costs?
Yes, secondary chemicals. Tannins in acorns are a great example. They taste bitter, astringent, and they can actually interfere with digestion, imposing a metabolic cost on the animal eating them.
So they taste bad and are slightly bad for you.
In large quantities, yeah. It reduces the immediate payoff of eating the acorn right now, again, encouraging the animal to store it for a future time of scarcity when maybe those costs are worth bearing. And often, those buried tannin-rich acorns are forgotten.
The plant is using chemistry to play the long game.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating manipulation.
Yeah.
And speaking of abundance and long games, there's masting.
Masting. That's when trees produce huge amounts of seeds all at once every few years.
Exactly. Synchronous production of massive seed crops. We used to think it was mainly about just overwhelming seed predators satiating them so some seeds survive.
But there's more to it, especially with caching animals.
Yes, because seed caching animals, like squirrels, they're not easily satiated during the caching phase. When there's a huge mast crop, they go into overdrive collecting and burying.
They bury way more than they could possibly eat.
Far more. This leads to a much higher proportion of nuts being dispersed widely and buried safely underground, protected from other seed predators like insects or deer. And this significantly boosts seedling establishment.
Do we have numbers on that?
Yeah, there was a study on Carapa procera, a tropical tree, showing something like a 4.5-fold increase in seedling establishment in mast years compared to non-mast years.
Wow. So flooding the market guarantees a future generation gets planted.
It's a very clever population-level strategy.
Okay, one last subtle trick. Something about smell.
Right. This is brilliant too. Plants seem to have evolved to minimize the odor of their buried seeds and nuts.
Why would they do that?
Because rodents, who are major pilferers of buried caches, rely heavily on their sense of smell to locate them.
Ah, so if the buried seed doesn't smell strongly.
It's much less likely to be found and dug up by another animal after the original cacher forgets it. It's like an invisible cloak against theft, increasing the odds that the seed will actually germinate.
Safeguarding their investment.
It's truly remarkable when you step back and consider the sheer breadth and sophistication of all these strategies. Communication, memory, mimicry, manipulation.
It really is. We've taken quite a mind-bending journey today, haven't we?
We really have.
From that hidden interconnectedness of the Wood Wide Web, these sophisticated airborne chemical conversations, to the surprising evidence for plant memory and maybe even learning.
Right. Yeah.
And finally, this just astonishing array of plant mimicry and active manipulation strategies.
And all of these insights, they really do fundamentally challenge our usual perception of plants, don't they? As just static green background elements.
It's likely.
They reveal them as dynamic, maybe even intelligent in their own way, and deeply interconnected players in this grand theater of life.
It really compels you to reevaluate what life or intelligence even means outside of our own animal-centric view.
It absolutely does.
So maybe the final thought to leave everyone with is, how might this growing understanding of plant intelligence, plant communication, plant agency, how might that change our relationship with the natural world? And, what other hidden intelligences might still be out there just waiting for us to notice, to discover?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much more is happening all around us, just beyond our current perception?